Hi, so I'm still waiting for our first frost of the year, but I am thinking about putting my garden to bed, and I wanted to show you a few things about my dahlias today. Last fall, I did an experiment. I left my dahlia tubers in the ground, and I garden in Colorado in zone 5-6. Like, it gets down to 20 below, 25 below some winters. It's not a warm place in the winter, but a local flower farmer near me has experimented with putting her dahlias in the ground and leaving them there all winter. And I wondered if her methods could be adapted for the home gardener. And so I tried, and I knew I was risking all of my tubers, but I will tell you, the experiment worked. And I want to show you today what I did and why I think it worked so well. Before we get into it, I want to encourage you to like and subscribe so you don't miss any content. This is part of a whole guide to growing dahlias in the home garden, not for flower farmers, but just for those of us who really love beautiful flowers. So like and subscribe so you don't miss anything. Okay, let's get started. For those of us growing dahlias in zones colder than USDA zone 8, the standard of care has been that after your first frost, you dig up your dahlia tubers. These are tubers that I've dug up, and you rinse them. And some people like to divide in the fall and some people like to divide in the spring, but you try to store them over the winter in a cool, dark place with just the right amount of humidity. Too much and they'll rot, too little and they'll shrivel up and die. And you keep them until spring when you plant them out either in pots or in the landscape, and you start the process all over. So that has been kind of the conventional wisdom to this point. However, there are some people who've been experimenting with, especially our changing climate, could we potentially leave dahlias in the ground? This is one of my dahlia beds. It is only planted out with dahlias. There, I have these burlap sacks. They're just coffee bean bags. I filled them up with leaves so that they were completely full. There are 3 sacks over this. Then I laid them down, covered everything with plastic, and then I'm holding that plastic down with all of this scrap wood you can see. So hopefully next spring I will take all of this off and my dahlias will be there and ready to go. And you can see I have some season extenders here. I will then uncover them, put plastic over it, and see if I can get my dahlias to start maybe even a month or 2 early. So I've left the leaves in these coffee bags. They're burlap sacks. And when winter is over, I'll pull the bags off, and then they will go and become part of my leaf mold making regime. Here we are, the middle of April, and it's time to see if the dahlias survived. And look at that. Survived and coming up a little bit. At least one of them survived. Oh, here's another one right here. We've got sprouts happening. So what I will do, I am shocked actually, but I'm going to take off the plastic, obviously, and the wood, and then I will take off all those leaves and we'll see what's under there. So here's the report. Every single one of the dahlias has sprouted. It's kind of a miracle. So the next steps, I will put a plastic drop cloth over this that kind of creates a little greenhouse over this bed, and fill up my oyas over here with water, and away we go. Okay, so let's take a look at how they grew. This is 2 weeks after I uncovered them. Look at all that fabulous growth. It was really astonishing. Those plants were ready to go. And the only issue that I had was that they were absolutely irresistible to rabbits. So here's my solution. I put these mesh trash cans over the top. I'll put the link in the comment below with everything that you see here. But the mesh trash cans kept the rabbits from being able to eat that lower foliage. And by the time it had outgrown the trash can, the plant was able to handle it if rabbits came over and took a nibble. So it worked really, really well. So here's the same bed less than a month later. This is the first week of June. The last one was the first week of May, and you can just see there's been an explosion of growth. It was really amazing. And I had, on the last week of March, potted up all kinds of dahlias in my greenhouse. Let's take a look at those. They are so much smaller than what was in that bed. Leaving them in the bed was an enormous advantage all summer long. Okay, so this is, you can see, we're at the end of the season. I think we've been touched by a little bit of frost, and things are falling over because we had serious wind a couple of days ago. These tubers that were left in the ground produced so many more flowers than my tubers that I potted up. So I'm very curious about that. I suspect it's less stress for them. They were already established. They certainly got an earlier start to life. So I think there were a lot of things kind of going for it. But the growth here, and you know, they look completely overgrown at this point, but the growth here was amazing. The flower output was astonishing. And while I treated them exactly the same as any other dahlias that I had, it was just night and day. Having said all of this, there are a couple of reasons why I feel like this was particularly successful here in Colorado. One of them is that while we do get quite a bit of snow, we aren't super saturated with moisture over the winter. And I mean, we're basically in a high desert climate. And so I think that is to our advantage, because dahlia tubers, the real big danger to dahlia tubers is that they rot. They do not like the wet. And I know that, for example, in the UK, a lot of people have to pull their dahlia tubers, not because it gets so cold in the winter, but because their winters are so wet and the tubers will just rot in the ground. So protecting them from the wet, I think, is the most important part. I also think this was successful in part because these are raised beds. The soil temperature tends to be about 10 degrees warmer than the soil temperature in the ground itself. So even when it did get down very, very cold in the winter, I don't think that soil was quite as cold. So if you're trying this somewhere else, you might think about putting them in a raised bed. And the other reason why I think this was effective is because 2 years ago, I decided I was only going to grow dahlias kind of all together, not planted out in the landscape. And that was simply because it was too hard. I kept losing tubers in the middle of the landscape, and I largely grow drought-tolerant plants, but of course dahlias are the exact opposite, and they needed more water and they needed more fertilizer and those kinds of things, and all of that together just meant that it was too hard to handle caring for one here and one here and one here and one here, and so I put them all together. And because of that, I think that is a big reason why this technique worked. Just like a flower farmer would, they're going to put all of their dahlias in one place and all of their dahlias of a single kind together so that they can keep track of the different plants. Adopting that as my technique seems to have really helped. So I think there are those three factors together, and I don't know. You're gonna have to excuse this plane flying over. That may not work for you, but I think it is worth a try. And this winter, once we've had our first frost, I'm gonna do another experiment. I do have some dahlias planted out in my orchard this year, and some of them I really love. But they're interplanted with lots of other plants, so I can't cover them with leaves and plastic. That's not okay for the other plants that are there. So I'm going to experiment a little bit. I have some ideas about what to do, and we'll see if they come up in the spring and if this works. And if so, of course, I'll share that with you too. That's all. If you have questions or comments, drop them down below and I'll be sure to answer them. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Happy gardening.